I just really regret not having read this book a decade ago. Hi, and welcome to the Book Bar, where everything bookish is on the menu. I'm Anne Jeanette Barr, and yes, I do think I'm probably the last person on the face of the planet who speaks English, and probably lots of other languages, who has not read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I can't believe I took so long to read this book. The reason I didn't read it before now is that I've seen the movie adaptations. At least the 5-hour BBC miniseries and the more recent Keira Knightley movie. And I liked them just fine. But I definitely tend to be kind of a plot reader. And if I already know what's going to happen, it's just not that exciting. And that's probably why I don't read a whole lot of romance in general, because romance can't be romance unless you have at least a happy ever, well, definitely, happy ever after, but, or at least a happy for now, or it doesn't really fit in the romance category, then it's some other genre with like romance put in, right? So if you know they're going to get together, then that takes some of the pleasure out of it. So I just thought that even though I liked the movies, I wouldn't be very excited about the book. I was wrong. So I have read other Jane Austen. I think the first one that I read was, well, I can't remember now which the first one I read was, but I've read Northanger Abbey twice. I've read Mansfield Park. I have read Persuasion and Lady Susan. So Lady Susan is really, really short. It almost doesn't count, although they did make the movie Love and Friendship off of it. And I know I read that one last of all of those. It may have been Persuasion that I read first, but my whole reason for choosing those books and not Pride and Prejudice when I had not seen the movies was because, let me show you my beautiful copy here. Pride and Prejudice is kind of thick, and I was intimidated by Jane Austen, and I just really thought that it would be too long for me, and I wouldn't be able to get through it. And I think I was in my early 20s the first time that I considered reading Jane Austen. And so Pride and Prejudice just didn't make the cut. And then again, I had seen the movie adaptations, and so I thought that it just wouldn't be that exciting for me. But, so, this won't be any surprise to you guys. Oh, by the way, I'm definitely having English breakfast because, of course, I am. You can't talk about Jane Austen without having some proper tea. Books are better than movies. Surprise! And even though those adaptations were really lovely, there's so much missed in translation to a film adaptation that really can't be, in many cases, adapted. But also, for time's sake, there's just a lot of fun little things that have to be left out. In this case, I'll give you a rundown just in case you, like me, had not read Pride and Prejudice and you're wondering if it's worth it. I'll just give you a little bit of a synopsis, very, very brief, because obviously most of us know what this book is about, and then why I think you should definitely read the book. Pride and Prejudice follows the Bennet family, and it's a father and mother and 5 girls. And this is a Regency period novel, and the family is well-to-do by most of our standards, but kind of, upper middle class as far as English aristocracy go. And they are wealthy enough to have a lot of comfort and luxury, but not wealthy enough to impress others. The the other people in their family don't have titles. They're regular people. And so when this family, all the girls come of age and they want these girls to have good marriages, they have their eyes set upward, especially because the estate that they live on is entailed to a male cousin. Because women couldn't own property, it was entailed to this male cousin who does have his sights on possibly marrying one of the girls and making it all better, kind of. But nonetheless, the girls don't have much agency on their own, and so especially the mother pins her hopes on them marrying above their station. So that's a pretty bland description of what is going on in the very simple plot, and probably because I imagined that all the funny one-liners were in the movie and there wasn't much more going on than that, I wasn't going to find anything extra in the book. But what Jane Austen does so well is to make these characters relatable, despite the fact that most of us don't live anywhere near the kind of life, the lifestyle that the people in this book live. She does do so much examining of human nature. And she really, if you studied any kind of, taken an English literature class, you already know a lot of this, that she was, going against the times and speaking out about women's roles and kind of making fun of some of the things in her time. But she does it in such a winsome way that, while being critical, also doesn't let us off the hook. We're not living like that anymore, so we could just kind of brush it off as, oh yes, that was such a silly time. But we are still people, just like these people were. And so one of the things that I loved about this book that I didn't expect to love is how my feelings about the main character, Lizzie Bennet, changed throughout the book. At turns I thought that she was really clever, and poor girl for being, the second in line and really having no choice over who she marries or if she marries and what her occupation is. And, she lives with this family that really, they're all kind of silly except for maybe her older sister. So, poor Jane, and poor Lizzie, and poor Jane is the older sister. But then the next minute feeling like, oh, Lizzie, you are so snarky. You don't have to be so snarky. And you're kind of selfish and begrudging, and oh, you're kind of gullible, and going back and forth. And I think when you have that pull of being, of admiring a character and relating to them, and then relating to them in ways that are not admirable, and you just really, feel like and love them, that the journey they take and the roller coaster they go on really is impactful. And that's what I found, that the ways that I related to the characters, not just Lizzie, were so much deeper in the book because you get to spend more time with them. And I think because you get to see their interior lives, you get to see what they're thinking and feeling, that I felt much more connected to all the characters. And I also felt like the lessons hit home better. One example of this is the mother character. I feel like the movies are, despite their best efforts, kind of a caricature of the characters. Even though I feel like both of the adaptations I've seen were excellently acted, I feel like you don't get the whole picture because you just only have so much time. They have to kind of give you the highlights. And one of the things I missed in the movies is that the character of the mother isn't just comic relief. So the mother and father, in the beginning of the book, you get to know them really quickly. I feel like you get to know them before you get to know the other girls, the younger girls. And that the mother is just kind of, you get from the movies that she's, oh, my poor nerves all the time, and that she just kind of only cares about her daughters getting married, and she's just kind of silly and nervous and frivolous, right? And the father is just kind of tolerant and, and just laid back and doesn't really step in to do anything, but more or less a good guy. But in the book, Jane Austen actually kind of goes on a little bit of a diatribe at one point against kind of what a failure they were as parents. I found it both kind of shocking that she kind of went there, and that she talked about how the failures of these two adults to choose a good match in each other and to raise good children was a failure for society, because they didn't really, the family, that family unit wasn't really benefiting society much. In some ways they were, a detriment to society in certain instances, not as a whole. I don't think she would say that. And but also that they had so much potential that was untapped, and that the father especially could have been more present, I think, in the lives of the girls and helped to guide them a little bit differently, and the girls could have turned out better or differently, the younger girls especially, and that the older two girls really got the best of their parents, and that it sounds like it got more and more lax as these children arrived. And as a mother of four, it was really poignant, and also made me kind of stop and think, like, oh, each child that we have deserves a full life of parenting, not just, kind of the leftovers, or you only have to teach your oldest ones and then they'll teach the younger ones, which there is some of that happens, thank goodness. But there were so many interesting parenting insights that I got from the book that were really kind of lost in the movie, or maybe I just didn't draw the connections. I found those characters and the way Jane Austen analyzed them so much more interesting, and it left me really pondering what life would have been like for them if things had been different between the mother and father characters in this book. And then also just the heartbreaking reality of, the book is called Pride and Prejudice because both of the hero and the heroine have maybe kind of first impressions that aren't justified and or need to do some growing, which from both the title and from the movies, and just from the very beginning, there's a lot of foreshadowing, you kind of know things aren't gonna go well in some ways. But as the story progresses, you see almost everyone growing, and also you see people having to make the best of things. It isn't necessarily a tidy, happy ending. I found it so much more fulfilling than I expected it to. And honestly, I just really regret not having read this book a decade ago. I feel like I could have been thinking on and dwelling on these ideas really from adolescence on up, and I want my children to read it so much earlier, because it's such a gentle and hilarious way to think through our life choices in this kind of relatively benign, in some ways. No one's getting murdered, no one is like, there are some potential kind of life-ruining moments in the book, but most of the characters are dealing with things that we now feel pretty insulated from. So it's not a book that makes you fear for yourself very much, but it gives you a lot to think about. So it is really fitting, I think, for young people to read, to help them think through some of these life issues vicariously. So I think everyone needs to read this book, and read it much younger than I am right now. And actually, so I have a friend, Haley Stewart, and if you've not read her book, you definitely should. I will link her in the description. She is writing a book right now that I think is going to be published next year, and I can't remember her working title, but it is all about life lessons learned from Jane Austen, and that was one of the motivations for me for reading this. And now I cannot wait to hear what she says about what we can learn from Pride and Prejudice. And also, I'm feeling a lot of pressure to get through Emma and Sense and Sensibility so that I can have read them all, because I want to get just as much out of that book as I possibly can when I read it. Also, right before I started this book, I finished Northanger Abbey for the second time, and I got so much more out of that the second time that I really think I am going to become one of those people that just reads and rereads Jane Austen, especially now that I know that it's not nearly as daunting as I had expected it to be, and that it's so funny and so, I don't know, just like I said, whimsical, that it just makes you have to keep reading. You just have to keep living life with these people. And I found out this year that there's such a thing as Jane Austen July, and that's why I decided to go ahead and read this now. I didn't finish it until August, so I decided that's called Austen August. And then I found that Modern Mrs. Darcy, I think, a blogger that I follow, also it said something along the lines, or maybe it was someone on Instagram, about Austen August. And I thought, well, there we go. July and August every year. That's just going to be when I read Jane Austen. But I do want to finish, I do want to try and get to Emma and Sense and Sensibility before that. So let me know if you know of a really good audiobook narrator for either of those, or if I should just pick them up and read them. I own them both. But this one, if you watched my video, I think it was my summer recap, no, my July recap, I talked about how I was listening to this on audiobook, and you guys, I listened to this, the Audible version that had Rosamund Pike as the narrator, and it was so good. I don't think she narrated either of the others. I'm almost positive. I almost want to try an audiobook for the others, but I'm also a little bit afraid that I'll be disappointed, because she is such a phenomenal actress, which I knew going in, because of course she played Jane in the newer version of Pride and Prejudice. But also, have you guys seen Gone Girl? Those are like the most opposite roles ever, and she just like floors you in both of them. I think she floored me in Gone Girl because I was like, whoa, Jane, what's going on? But she's not Jane. I mean, she just melds into the roles that she takes. And the same thing happened in the audiobook. She sounded like every single character, how I imagine them in my mind, but also probably because I'm sure she narrated this after she played Jane. She sounded like the actors in many ways, kind of took on their mannerisms. And so I often just forgot that I was listening to one person, and it was like a full cast. Such a good narration. So if you are going to listen to this on audiobook, just don't even look at any others. Just get the Rosamund Pike narration, because it's absolutely worth all the money. Just take it all. And it was so good. So yeah, I want to know from you whether or not you have listened to Emma or Sense and Sensibility on audio, and if there is a narration that can even stand close of a chance to Rosamund Pike's, so that I know whether or not I should get that, or just go ahead and read it, or both, or all. I did read a little bit of this in my novel, in my paperback novel, because there were a couple of times where I couldn't find the quiet to listen, but I could drown everyone out and read it, like late at night, and when I didn't want to listen to something next to my husband in bed. I was able to read a little bit of it in the book itself. Yeah, I want to read it in all the formats. I'm really in love with this book, you guys. So you saw from the opening sequence that I gave it 5 stars, and I think it's going to be on my list of favorites forever and ever. So why I didn't read it before, I don't know. Well, thank you for watching. I appreciate you coming back and watching my reviews, video after video, and all my other content. If you do like my content, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and that way you'll know when I come out with something else. I really appreciate all of you who have stuck around. So leave me a comment and tell me your favorite Jane Austen. Tell me what I should read next, Jane Austen or otherwise. And as always, tell me what's in your cup.